Hello guys, my name is Dan and I'm the painter of the Tyrant's Tavern Painting Studios. You may have seen me on Facebook or Instagram, or even in person if you've been to a Blood Bowl tournament in the Midlands. I'm a commission painter. I've been painting models since 2001, and I'm also now painting models with the Two Drunk Flings and showing you how to paint certain models. So the first one I'm going to do is show you how to paint this little guy. So this is the catcher or the thrower for the Cutimals team from Greebo. So I was given this team a while back now, but I've only just had a chance to edit it all, set it all up, and get it ready for you. So I hope it's something you can use. It's just how I tackle certain models, and you might find something from it. Right, let's enjoy. So let's jump in. So this model had already been sprayed with contrast spray from Games Workshop, Wraithbone. I'm fortunate enough to have an airbrush. So what I've done is I've sprayed the entire model and I've sprayed it with Skeleton Horde contrast paint and let it sit to get a nice even distribution. It dries pretty quick, to be honest, so it didn't take too long for it to all dry and be set. So when I'm painting, I normally go by eye, but I try and do 3 stages of each paint. So I'll do a base layer, I'll then do a layer, and then I'll do a highlight. And if I want to go further, I'll then do a step in between each one. But to keep it simple, this one, what I've done is I've sprayed it with contrast Wraithbone. I've then sprayed it with the contrast colour Skeleton Horde. And the first layer, what I'm doing is I'm going over with Ushabti Bone. So I water it down slightly. I kind of keep it a little bit thick, just so it doesn't run and pour into the ribs. So I'm going over it all. Once that's done, I'll let it dry, and I'll go over with the next layer. So the next layer is Screaming Skull. So same again, water it down a little bit, keep it a little bit thick, and then what I'm doing is I'm going to go over each bone again, but I'm going to go in the middle and leave the edges of each bone with a little bit of Ushabti Bone showing through, just to add depth. So once that's done, I'm then going to do it with a very, very tiny highlight of white, and I use white Scar White. Same again, water it down a little bit, and then I go over the very tips. So I'll go around all of the bone edges, on the tips of the wings, the very centre of the rib cages, the spine, everything, just to make it look a little bit more 3D. Also, when I'm working, I tend to go from the most colour. So this obviously is a skeleton, so the most colour showing on this model is going to be like a bone or a cream or a white. So I will always start with the base colour, like the main base colour, so and work my way outwards most of the time if I can. So as you can see, I've gone for the bone. And then once that's done, I'll then work on the little parts around the model, trying not to get any paint on the base colour, which is the bone. But even if you do, it's not a problem. Just touch back up later with the same colour. It's practice, it doesn't matter at all. So I've been eagerly awaiting these models to come out from Greebo. They're fantastic. I've always wanted a Khemri team for myself. But obviously Workshop have never released anything yet. And with the new releases now, I don't know what's going to happen. But these are fantastic. These are really, really nice models. They are a bit smaller than what you may be used to, but there's so much character in them. They're really, really fun to paint. So I'm trying to be as careful as I can, but if you get any paint into the recesses of the ribs or anything, it really doesn't matter. Just go over it. It's just a modelling of the day. It's just to have a bit of fun. As you can see, there's a couple of places that I may have gone into. I'll just touch them up at the end, so don't ever worry about it. It happens. There you go, so the bone is all completed, so now I'm going to move on to the next step. So now that the bone is all completed, I want to give it a bit of a dirty look, so like it's been sand brushed, the sand's been beating it. So what I've done is I've given it a slight wash in Seraphim Sepia. Very, very light coating, as I find that sometimes the Citadel shades are fantastic, sometimes they pull and they go really shiny and that dries me up the wall. So what I do is I put my brush in and I get most of it off, and then I give it a light brushing and it dries matte near enough most of the time. Okay, so you can see that the model is now set with the sepia tone. It's not as bright as it was before, it's a bit more of a dirtier bone colour, which I'm happy with. I didn't do the teeth though at the same time. I did that for a reason. I wanted the teeth to stand out a little bit because I'm going to do the beak, so obviously it's going to be a different colour. So with the teeth, I went straight on to the very first base colour, just with the white scar white, and I did it with probably about a 70 to 30% ratio of paint to water, so it didn't pull in the gaps. But even if it does, all you got to do is go over the very thin brush in between, with a brown or a dark black, and it will stand out again. So I kind of pick what I fancy doing next. There's no real set system to what I do when I paint, but I really fancied having a go at his beak. So the next thing I did was I wanted to add some depth to the beak. So instead of going straight on with yellow, so I wanted to do a nice yellow beak, what I've done is I've painted it first with a layer of scrag brown. So what I'm going to do when I go to the next stage is leave that layer of scrag brown behind, right up by his cheekbones, to add more depth into the beak. So you'll see it on the next step. Right, so moving on with the beak, I went on with Avalanche Sunset. So it's a dark yellow, and you'll notice when I'm painting it, I'm going to leave a little bit of layer behind with the brown, just by the eyes and the cheekbone, just to add a little bit of depth. It's only a very small line, but it makes a big difference when you finish. So once that's set, the next layer on the beak I did was Uriel Yellow, and this was to make it pop and give a proper, probably like a Tweety Pie sort of beak colour. A real yellow colour. Same again, 70-30 with the paint ratio. If it's ever different, I'll always say, but most of the time that's what I use. Again, I've left a little bit of the last colour behind, so you'll notice that there's the scrag brown, which is at the start. There's then the next layer, which is the Avalanche Sunset, and then I started painting the yellow colour from the beak. I work backwards, and when I see that I'm hitting the last colour, I leave a little bit of the gap so you've got the last colour showing through. It's just all to add depth and shadow. For the very tip, what I've done is I've gone over very lightly with Screaming Skull. So in this case I have watered it down a little bit more. I've probably watered this down about 50-50. The reason being is because I want it to leave a very, very slight tinge to the very edge of the beak. I don't want it to be of a solid colour, I want it to be very, very light. So by doing the 50-50%, what it's going to do is as it dries, it will drip down to the edge of the beak with gravity, and it will drag the pigment and the paint with it. So what's going to happen is that the paint will draw to the front of the beak where the very tip is, which I want the lightest part to be, and it will leave a kind of streak or a shadow behind, and it'd be really good, trust me. So I've already made a start on the ball, so I'm painting this ball in a base layer of Screaming Pink. I've imagined the ball to look like a ruby sphere type of gem, so I've painted it in this lovely Screamer Pink. So as you can see, I've also done the little gem on his chest. I just thought it would be a nice symmetry with the ball. So the next stage is to shade it. So what I've done is I've gone over it with normal oil, and instead of going straight on with the brush, I've dipped my brush into the pot, and then I've got a little bit of the oil off, and I've then gone over so it doesn't pull and go shiny. I really wish I could paint this quick, it'd be fantastic for commission work. Okay, so you can see that's dried and a nice matte finish. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to make it look like it's shiny. So what I'm doing is going first on with the gem at the top. So I'm going back on with the base layer of Screamer Pink, and I'm doing a kind of crescent moon sort of effect. So it doesn't go on the whole gem, it covers like the bottom half, and then like a Nike tick. So it's thick at the bottom, going up it gets thinner. And then I'm jumping straight on the ball. So what I'm doing is the same thing with the ball. So I'm leaving a dark patch in the middle of the ball. So I'm always highlighting on the edge of it, leaving a darker patch on the opposite side. As what it's going to do is hopefully it's have an effect like it's a gem or a sapphire. So what I'm doing now is the next stage of highlighting. As I didn't have a set colour for this one, I've had to mix it, which worked to a degree because it keeps the contrast of the colours all the way through the gem. So what I've done with this one, I've mixed Screamer Pink with White Scar, and I've literally gone 80% of Screamer Pink to 20% of White Scar, and I've watered it down probably slightly a bit more than I normally would. So this I'll probably say about 60-40 paint to water. So instead of jumping straight on with that paint, I've dipped my paint into the mixed solution, and I've just wiped a little bit off on my tissue, and then I'm doing the same again as I did before. So I'm going on the very edges, I'm doing the far side in the highlighted colour and leaving the opposite side as the original colour. but I'm also leaving a little bit of the last layer behind as well. So I'm not completely painting over all of what I've just done. I'm painting over just the edges, and I'll add more depth into the ball. So I'm using that same mix as before, but now I've added more white to it. So the mixing ratio now is probably about 60-40. I'll scream a pink to white. Again, water it down a little bit. So now what I'm doing, I'm picking out the very edges of it. So you'll notice that the gem was the night tick, so thick at the bottom, going up a nice thin streak. And now onto the ball, and I'm doing the very edges. So I'm doing the bits that are sticking out the most. Basically edge highlighting, so just the highlighting the edges of the ball. So I've been painting now for about, I think it's 2001. I first got into it when Lord of the Rings came out, and you could buy the magazines with the free models in from newsagents. That's what got me started, and I just painted and painted, and obviously I've never been taught properly. I've just learnt from experience and mistakes, and I kind of have my colours are always in my head. I never have to write them down, luckily enough, so I kind of use the same patterns throughout any colour, unless I'm experimenting. But most of the time it's the same base colours: base colour, highlight colour, and then the edge highlighting colour. And if I want to go a bit further, then I'll break each step into two halves. So I'll go base layer, I'll then go base mid layer, then I'll go mid layer, then I'll go mid layer highlight layer, then highlight layer, edge layer, and then I'll go edge layer. And that's when you start racking up hours and painting experience and stuff. So this one is just my 3 base layer method. It's a good finish, and it's not too difficult really, and it's good practice. Right, so the next thing I've jumped onto was the gold. So majority of all the metal parts on this, I went for gold, a nice Egyptian theme. I'm basically basing this on with Retribution gold. So, sorry, Retribution armor. So this is the base layer that I used to start with. So I went all around the headpiece, around the necklace, and the two, I don't know what they are, the clasps on the ball. So I went with them with the gold as well. I think in some parts you can see that I've gone over on the purple with the gold, only very slightly. If this happens, don't worry about it. I mean, you can see it right there, it's on the back. All you got to do is touch it up at the end. It's not a problem. Don't stop and start, just carry on while you've got the paint fresh. Because if you start stopping and starting, the paint will clog and it won't have a smooth flow of motion. So between the last shot and this shot, to speed things up a little bit, what I did was I give it a wash once it was all dried with Seraphim Sepia, to get a nice rusty metal look as a base layer, and then to highlight it, normally I'd do a bit more layers, but for this it's just a video, tutorial video. So what I've done is I've just gone right around the rim with the Liberator Gold. Just the edge highlighting, I left the bit in the middle just so it added a bit of depth to the top of the model. For the last bit of highlighting on the metal, all I've done is gone over with Storm Host Silver. So I've gone over the very edges where I think the light might catch the gold. So I've done it on his necklace at the very bottom, on the 2 clasps at the top, on the headpiece. I've done it on the beak, I've done it on the breast of the bird, and I've done it on the very bottom, and just on the bottom of the board as well, just gone on the clasps, just very edges, just to make it look like the light is gleaming off the gold. So for the cloth and the headband, I've gone with the traditional yellow and blue, nice Egyptian colours. So what I've gone on with this one is I've gone straight on with Caldor Sky. So Caldor Sky as the blue, and I've put it all on the cloth on the breastplate, and I've also put it around the trim on the headrest. So once the blue's all finished, to shade it all, I've painted it over with Drakenhof Nightshade. Not to let it pull so it doesn't go shiny again. I've done the breastplate and the headrest. Highlighting the blue, I've gone back over with Caldor Sky, touching more upon the edges, leaving a darker shade in the middle. So the next stage of highlighting, I've used Caldor Sky mixed with White Scar, 60-40 ratio for blue to white, mixed with a little bit of water but keeping it mainly a little bit thick. So that'll be a 70-30 ratio, I guess. So I've gone over the edges. As you can see, I've gone over the edges, little tear in the scarf on the front. And moving on to the back of the model, I've then gone over the blue, so you can see I've left a space between each one, and that's where I'm going to put the yellow colour. Finishing off the blue, I've used the same mixture as before, but I've put more white into it this time, and I've gone over the edges, and I've also put like a little hashtag in the scarf, just so it looks like it's been roughed up and torn. And on the back of the headrest, same as the gem, I'm highlighting, and this is easier actually because it's a square, you can actually see it more. It's like a backwards L shape, so it's leaving the shade of the other colour, the opposite side, and then the highlight colour on one side. So to finish the model off, I went across with the yellow on the headband, so it was exactly the same stages as the beak: Scrag Brown, Avalanche Yellow, Urea Yellow, and then Screaming Skull just to tighten up the edges like the blue. And on the ball, I've gone over with a varnish to make it look like a nice shiny gem. So to finish off the model itself, I've painted the eye sockets, and I've also separated all the teeth with black. With the gem ball at the bottom and the gem on his chest, I've used a varnish to make them stand out and go all shiny. And to base the model, I wanted it to look like a sand base. So what I've used the Citadel Technical Armageddon Dunes. I've just spread it out evenly all across the base. And I'm going to add pigments to the base to make it a little bit more sand-like. For them, I've used the Forge World weathering powders, and I'll show you the next step. So normally I'd advise you to let the base dry completely, but I didn't on this one, but it still went out like completely the same. So what I've done with this one is I've gone over the base, and I've used the Forge World weathering powders. So what I've done to use these is I've got a little bit of powder on my tile, and I've got a decent sized brush, not too big, not too small, and I've dipped it in water, and I just mix it with the powders, and I'm just dabbing it in places. The one I've used here, the first powder, is weathering powder dark sand, so I've just gone in certain areas just to add a bit of depth into the soil. If you want to make it nice and spread out in different patches, what I've done, once I've put all my little dots on, if you just go over very lightly with the water and just spread it out, it will find its own little recesses and it will set, and it'll look a bit more natural as well. Doing the same technique as before, I'm doing the next layer, and this one was done with Forge World weathering powder dry bone. So I just mixed it all out, and that will pull and find its own little place and look a nice natural sandy base. To finish off the base, once that's all dried and set, I've then dry brushed very lightly with Screaming Skull. And there he is, all finished. So what I've done to finish it off completely is I've painted the rim with VX88. To get a nice smooth finish on the base, I do it in two parts. So I water it down for 70-30 again, and then I'll paint it, let it dry, and then I'll do it again, probably the same ratio, 70-30, and you get a nice smooth base rim. And just to finish it off, I just put a nice Blood Bowl white line straight across, as this is either just scored or just run into the touchdown line.
Well, look who it